My name is Maxine, and I'm 26 years old. As I stand here adjusting my wedding veil, I can't help but think about the path that led me here. 10 years ago, my entire family disowned me after discovering I wasn't my father's biological child. Now, as I'm planning the happiest day of my life, they've suddenly reappeared, demanding forgiveness and a place at my wedding. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button and stick around to see how I handled the family who pretended I never existed. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I had what anyone would call a picture-perfect childhood. Our two-story colonial house with the white picket fence and the tire swing in the front yard was the envy of the neighborhood. My father, James, was everything a girl could want in a dad. He coached my softball team every summer from when I was 7 until I turned 15, never missing a single game even when work was hectic. I remember how he would cheer the loudest when I stepped up to bat, his voice carrying across the field. "That's my girl. You got this, Maxie." When I turned 16, he taught me how to drive in the empty high school parking lot on weekends, patiently guiding me through three-point turns and parallel parking. He never raised his voice even when I accidentally ran over the curb and nearly took out the school sign. Instead, he laughed and said, "Well, at least now they'll have a reason to replace that ugly thing." That was my dad, always finding the humor in every situation. Our family unit seemed solid. My mother, Diana, was a kindergarten teacher beloved by the community. She was softer than my father, with a gentle approach to parenting that balanced his sometimes strict rules. My older brother Andrew was the athletic star of the family, following in Dad's footsteps as a baseball player. 3 years older than me, he was protective but also annoying in the way that only big brothers can be. My younger sister Sophia, 2 years my junior, was the artistic one, always painting or playing piano. And then there was me in the middle, the writer, the dreamer, the one who seemed to inherit my father's determination and my mother's empathy. Our family traditions were sacred rituals that made me feel secure. Sunday dinners were non-negotiable, all electronics banned, as we shared stories from our week. Every Christmas Eve, we would drive around the neighborhood looking at lights before coming home to open one present each. Summer vacations to Lake Michigan were planned months in advance, the same cabin rented year after year, creating layers of memories in the same beloved space. Looking back, there were subtle clues that something wasn't quite right. The way my grandparents sometimes looked at me with an odd expression when they thought I wasn't watching. The hushed conversations between my parents that would abruptly end when I entered a room. The occasional distance in my father's eyes when someone would comment on how unlike him I looked. "She must take after Diana's side," was the common refrain at family gatherings. Unlike my siblings, who had my father's hazel eyes and strong jaw, I had blue eyes and softer features. But these differences were explained away, genetics discussed with a dismissive wave of the hand. And I never questioned it, because why would I? James was my father in every way that mattered. School was where I truly excelled, particularly in writing. My English teachers would read my essays aloud to the class, and my short stories won district competitions. My father proudly displayed my certificates and awards in his office. "You got the brains in this family, Maxie," he would say, ruffling my hair. "You're going to be something special." Our house was my sanctuary. I had the bedroom with the window seat overlooking the backyard, where I would curl up with books for hours. My walls were covered with posters of my favorite bands and photos of my friends. It was a space that reflected who I was, secure in my identity as James and Diana's daughter. My best friend Zoe had been by my side since 3rd grade, when she defended me against a playground bully. She practically lived at our house, joining us for family dinners and vacations. "Your family is so normal," she would say, coming from a home with divorced parents who barely spoke to each other. "You're so lucky." And I believed I was lucky right up until my 16th birthday party, when everything I thought I knew about my family and my place in it would be shattered beyond repair. What should have been a celebration would become the day my father looked at me like I was a stranger, the day I learned that blood could matter more than 16 years of love, the day I became invisible in my own home. The morning of my sweet 16 dawned bright and clear, a perfect September Saturday. I woke up early, too excited to sleep, the anticipation of the day bubbling through my veins. Mom had promised me the party of my dreams, and for weeks we had been planning every detail. The theme was Midnight in Paris, inspired by my obsession with French culture and my dream of studying abroad in college. Our backyard would be transformed with twinkling lights, miniature Eiffel Towers, and French-inspired food. I spent the morning getting ready with Zoe, who arrived carrying her overnight bag and a perfectly wrapped gift. We blasted music in my bedroom, dancing around as we did our makeup and tried different hairstyles. "This is going to be the best night ever," Zoe declared, helping me into the blue dress we had spent weeks searching for. When I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized the almost adult staring back at me. "You look beautiful, Maxie," Zoe said, squeezing my shoulders. "Everyone's going to freak when they see you." But before the guests arrived, I heard the first sign that something was wrong. Passing by my parents' bedroom, I overheard an argument, their voices kept low but intense. I paused, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop, but unable to walk away. "Not today, Diana," my father was saying, his voice tight with anger. "We agreed never to discuss this." "I can't keep living with this hanging over us," my mother replied, her voice tearful. "She deserves to know the truth." "The truth?" My father laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is that she's my daughter. I raised her. That's the only truth that matters. James, please." "No, this is not happening today. This is her birthday, for God's sake. Drop it." I backed away from the door, confused and uneasy. What truth was my mother talking about? What could be so important that it was causing this tension on what should be a happy day? But then the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first guests, and I pushed the overheard conversation to the back of my mind. The party started wonderfully. The backyard looked magical in the late afternoon light, and everyone exclaimed over the decorations. I was surrounded by friends from school, relatives who had driven in for the occasion, and neighbors who had known me my entire life. The food was perfect, the music was great, and for a while I forgot about the strange argument I'd overheard. My father seemed to be overcompensating, being extra attentive, taking dozens of photos and making sure everything was perfect. My mother, on the other hand, seemed distracted, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. But I was too caught up in the celebration to worry much about it. As the evening wore on and the fairy lights twinkled against the darkening sky, it was time for toasts. My father stood first, raising his glass. "To my beautiful daughter on her 16th birthday. Maxine, you have brought nothing but joy into our lives from the day you were born. Your mother and I couldn't be prouder of the young woman you're becoming." There were more toasts from my siblings, from Zoe, from my favorite aunt, and then my Uncle Robert, my father's brother, stood up. He'd always been the family wild card, known for inappropriate jokes and drinking too much at gatherings. Tonight was no exception. He swayed slightly as he raised his glass. "To my niece Maxine," he began, his words slightly slurred. "Sweet 16 and looking so much like Thomas these days. It's remarkable, isn't it? Those blue eyes are unmistakable." The party fell silent. My father's face drained of color. "Sit down, Robert," he said, his voice dangerously low. But Uncle Robert, too drunk to read the room, continued. "What? It's not like it's a secret anymore. Everyone knows Diana had that thing with Thomas back in the day. Water under the bridge now, right?" My mother made a strangled sound, half gasp, half sob. I looked from her stricken face to my father's thunderous expression, not understanding what was happening. "Dad," I said, my voice small in the terrible silence that had fallen over the party. "What's Uncle Robert talking about?" My father couldn't even look at me. His eyes were fixed on my mother, who had begun to cry silently. "You told me he never knew," he said to her. "You promised me that Thomas had no idea." "He didn't," my mother whispered. "Robert must have figured it out on his own. James, please." "Is it true?" My father's voice cracked as he finally turned to look at me. But it was like he was seeing me for the first time, or perhaps seeing someone else in my place. "Are you Thomas's daughter?" The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "What, Dad? I don't understand." My mother stepped forward, then her face tear-streaked. "James, not like this. Please, let's talk about this privately." But it was too late. The damage was done. Uncle Robert, finally realizing what he had set in motion, tried to backtrack. "Hey now, I was just making a joke." "Some joke," my father said bitterly. Then to my mother, Tell me the truth, Diana. Is Maxine my biological daughter? The silence that followed was answer enough, but my mother, tears streaming down her face, shook her head. No, she whispered. But James, you've been her father in every way that matters for 16 years. Nothing has to change. But everything had already changed. I could see it in my father's face, the shock and betrayal giving way to a cold, hard anger. He looked at me again, and this time there was no love in his eyes, no recognition of our shared history. There was only a stranger looking at another stranger. Dad, I said again, reaching for him. He stepped back from my touch. I need some air, he said, and walked away, leaving me standing there surrounded by shocked party guests. The party disintegrated after that. People made awkward excuses and left. My siblings disappeared into the house. My mother tried to talk to me, but her explanations were jumbled and tear-soaked. Something about a brief affair with a family friend named Thomas, while my father was away on a business trip. How she had never told Thomas about the pregnancy, how my father had agreed to raise me as his own, how they had decided never to tell anyone the truth. But all I could focus on was the fact that the man I had called Dad for 16 years had walked away from me without a backward glance. Later that night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the perfect blue dress crumpled around me, staring at the wall of family photos. In every one, my father smiled, his arm around me, proud and loving. Had it all been a lie? As midnight struck, officially ending my 16th birthday, I curled up on my window seat and cried until there were no tears left. My world had shattered, and I had no idea how to begin picking up the pieces. The days following my birthday passed in a haze of silence and tension. Our home, once warm and full of conversation, became a mausoleum of unspoken words and avoided gazes. My father, who had always been the first to say good morning and the last to say good night, now barely acknowledged my existence. At breakfast, he would read the newspaper, creating a physical barrier between us. If I entered a room, he would find a reason to leave it. When forced to speak to me about practical matters, his voice was cold and formal, as if addressing a distant acquaintance rather than the daughter he had raised for 16 years. Your mother tells me you need money for a school field trip, he would say, placing cash on the counter without making eye contact. Or, please let your mother know I'll be working late again tonight, using her as an intermediary rather than speaking to me directly. My mother tried her best to bridge the growing chasm, but her efforts were weak and ineffectual. He just needs time, Maxie, she would say, her voice pleading. This has been a shock for all of us. A shock for all of us, I repeated incredulously. Mom, my entire identity has been erased overnight. And you've known the truth all along. How could you lie to me my whole life? She had no good answer for that. Just tears and stammered justifications. We thought it was for the best. We never meant for you to find out this way. So, when were you planning to tell me, or were you ever going to tell me at all? Her silence was answer enough. My siblings followed my father's lead. Andrew, who had always been protective of me, now treated me like an intruder. He canceled our weekly basketball games in the driveway without explanation. Sophia, who had shared a love of music with me, suddenly had no time to listen to new songs together. At dinner, they would talk around me, discussing school events or sports as if I weren't there. School became my only escape, though. Even there, I struggled to concentrate. My grades began to slip for the first time in my academic career. My English teacher, Mrs. Sanderson, pulled me aside after class one day. Is everything all right at home, Maxine? She asked, concern evident in her kind eyes. This essay isn't up to your usual standard. I almost broke down then, the simple question threatening to unravel my carefully maintained composure. But I couldn't bear the thought of anyone else knowing the humiliating truth. I'm fine, I lied. Just a little tired. 2 weeks after my birthday, I gathered my courage and approached my father in his study, determined to break through the wall he had built between us. He was at his desk, glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed work documents. Dad, I began, my voice shaking slightly. Can we talk? He looked up, his face a mask of indifference. About what? About what happened. About us. He removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. There's nothing to talk about, Maxine. Nothing to talk about. You've been my father for 16 years and now you can barely look at me. How can you just throw away our entire relationship because of something that isn't even my fault? For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, a brief glimpse of the father I had known. But then it was gone, replaced by a coldness that chilled me to the bone. I raised you believing you were my child, he said flatly. That belief was what made you my daughter. Now that I know the truth, things are different. Different how I'm still the same person I was before. No, he said, putting his glasses back on and returning to his papers. You're not. Please close the door on your way out. I stood there stunned by his dismissal, tears streaming down my face, but he didn't look up again, effectively ending the conversation. As I turned to leave, I noticed something that hadn't registered before. The wall of his study, once covered with family photos, now displayed only pictures of Andrew and Sophia. Every image that included me had been removed, as if he were systematically erasing me from the family history. The extended family's rejection was almost as painful as my father's. My grandparents, who had always doted on me, stopped calling. Invitations to family gatherings mysteriously excluded me. At Thanksgiving, I learned that everyone else was gathering at my grandparents' house, but I wasn't welcome. It's just too awkward right now, my mother explained weakly. Give them time to adjust. One afternoon, while searching for a school permission slip in my mother's desk, I found a bundle of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. Curiosity overcame me, and I began to read. They were from Thomas, dated from before my birth. Love letters, passionate and full of plans for a future together. The last one was a breakup letter, confused and hurt, wondering why Diana had suddenly ended things. When I confronted my mother with the letters, her face crumpled. You weren't supposed to see those. Did Thomas ever know about me? I demanded. Did you even give him a chance to be my father? No, she admitted, looking away. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. Your father James and I had been going through a rough patch, but we were working things out. Thomas was younger, still finishing graduate school. I didn't think he was ready to be a father. So you lied to everyone. To Dad, to Thomas, to me. I thought I was protecting all of you, she whispered. Well, congratulations, Mom, I said bitterly. Your protection has cost me my family. The final blow came 3 months after my birthday. My father called me into his study, his face set in lines of grim determination. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. This situation isn't working for anyone. Your mother and I have discussed it, and we think it would be best if you lived elsewhere for a while. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. You're kicking me out, I'm 16. We've spoken with Zoe's parents. They've agreed to let you stay with them until you graduate. We'll continue to pay for your education and provide a modest allowance, but I think we all need some space. Space? I repeated, my voice rising. You mean you need me gone so you don't have to be reminded that Mom cheated on you? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're punishing me for something she did? His face hardened. This isn't a negotiation, Maxine. You'll move to the Parkers this weekend. And just like that, at 16 years old, I was exiled from the only home I had ever known my family intact, except for the daughter they had decided they could live without. Moving into Zoe's home was a blur of cardboard boxes and tearful goodbyes to the walls that had witnessed my childhood. Mrs. Parker, Zoe's mom, had cleared out their guest room for me, painting it my favorite shade of blue and buying new bedding to make me feel welcome. But despite their kindness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an intruder, a charity case they had taken in out of pity. Your family now, Mrs. Parker insisted, hugging me tightly when she found me crying in my new room the first night. For as long as you need us. High school became a struggle of dividing my attention between academics and the part-time job I insisted on taking at the local bookstore. Though my father continued to provide financial support as promised, I couldn't bear the thought of being completely dependent on his reluctant charity. Each check that arrived felt like a reminder that money was the only connection he was willing to maintain. The bookstore job became my sanctuary in many ways. Between the shelves of stories, I could lose myself for hours, temporarily forgetting my own painful narrative. The manager, an older woman named Ruth, took me under her wing, giving me extra hours when she saw how much I needed both the money and the distraction. Books saved me when I was your age, she told me one quiet afternoon. Sometimes other people's stories help us make sense of our own. But despite the distractions of work and school, there were nights when the weight of abandonment became too heavy to bear. 6 months after moving out, I experienced a complete emotional breakdown. It happened at school of all places during what should have been a routine English class discussion about family dynamics in To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch represents the ideal father figure, one of my classmates was saying. Someone who stands by his children no matter what. Something inside me shattered. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my chair, and ran from the classroom. I made it to the girls' bathroom before the sobs overwhelmed me, violent and uncontrollable. That's where Zoe found me 20 minutes later, curled on the floor, gasping for breath between tears. "That's it," she said firmly, helping me to my feet. "You're seeing someone. This isn't something you can handle on your own, Maxie, and that's okay." The school counselor referred me to a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma, Dr. Lewis became my lifeline, the one person with whom I could be completely honest about the complex tangle of emotions I was experiencing, the anger at my mother for her deception, the confusion about my biological father, and the devastating grief over losing the man I had always called Dad. "What you're experiencing is a form of complicated grief," Dr. Lewis explained in one of our early sessions. "You're mourning the loss of your father and your family, but it's complicated because they're still alive. They've rejected you, which can be more painful than a death in many ways." With her guidance, I began the long process of processing my grief and anger. Meanwhile, I made several attempts to repair the relationship with my father. I sent cards on his birthday and Father's Day. I called and left voicemails that went unreturned. I even wrote him a long letter pouring out my heart, telling him how much I missed him, and that no matter what biology said, he would always be my real father. The letter came back unopened, stamped "Return to Sender." That final rejection hurt more than anything that had come before. Through mutual friends, I learned that my family had systematically removed all evidence of my existence from their home. Photos that had included me were replaced with new ones featuring just my parents and siblings. My bedroom had been converted into a home office. It was as if they were trying to erase the 16 years I had been part of their family. My brother and sister were forbidden from contacting me. Andrew was away at college by then, but Sophia was still at home, subject to our father's rules. Once she secretly called me from a friend's phone, whispering as if afraid of being overheard. "I miss you," she said, her voice small and sad. "Dad gets angry if we mention your name. Mom cries all the time. Everything's awful without you." "Can you talk to him for me?" I asked, hope flaring briefly. "Tell him I want to come home." "I've tried," she said. "We all have. He won't listen to anyone." That was the only time we spoke. After that, Sophia seemed to accept our father's edict, and I became persona non grata to my entire immediate family. There was one exception to the family-wide rejection. My Aunt Elaine, my mother's sister, reached out to me about 8 months after I moved out. She invited me to lunch, and though I was wary, I agreed to meet her. "What your parents did to you was wrong," she said bluntly over sandwiches at a cafe far from my old neighborhood. "I've told Diana as much, but she's always been weak when it comes to standing up to James." Aunt Elaine became my only connection to my former life. She provided updates about the family I was no longer part of and offered emotional support that my mother was too cowed to provide. She also gave me a small financial cushion, setting up a college fund for me, separate from the basic support my father was providing. "Your education is your ticket to independence," she insisted, "and you deserve the chance to build a good life despite what they've done." That college fund, combined with the partial scholarship I earned through dogged determination to maintain my grades despite everything, allowed me to attend State University the following year. I chose a school several hours away from Chicago, eager for the chance to start fresh in a place where no one knew my painful history. The day I graduated high school, I stood among my classmates in cap and gown, scanning the audience for familiar faces. Zoe's family was there cheering loudly. Aunt Elaine had driven up for the ceremony. Ruth from the bookstore waved enthusiastically from the back row. But the seats I had secretly reserved for my parents and siblings remained conspicuously empty. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I realized I was truly on my own now, and somehow I would have to find a way to be enough for myself. College represented freedom, a blank slate where no one knew me as the girl whose father disowned her. In Boston, 3 states and hundreds of miles from the remnants of my old life, I began the process of rebuilding myself from scratch. My dorm room, though small and shared with a stranger, became my first true space since leaving home, a sanctuary that was mine by right, not by charity. My roommate Lucia was a computer science major from Florida with an infectious laugh and zero tolerance for self-pity. When I tentatively shared parts of my story with her, she responded with refreshing directness. "So your dad's a jerk and your mom's a doormat," she summarized. "That sucks, but it doesn't define who you are. What are you going to do about it?" Her question challenged me to stop seeing myself as a victim and start actively shaping my own narrative. I declared a major in marketing and communications, discovering a talent for understanding what made people connect with stories and brands. My writing skills, once channeled into mournful journal entries, found new purpose in creating compelling campaigns for class projects. Working part-time at the University Media Center helped cover expenses beyond my scholarship and the dwindling funds from my father. Each semester that passed without needing to ask him for additional money felt like a small victory, another thread cut in the complex web of dependency and resentment that still bound us. Therapy continued to be a crucial part of my healing process. Dr. Lewis had referred me to a colleague in Boston, and Dr. Chen helped me navigate the new challenges of independence while still processing the ongoing grief of family estrangement. "Healing isn't linear," she reminded me when I'd beat myself up over still feeling sad about my family years after the initial rejection. "Some days will be easier than others. The goal isn't to never feel pain again, it's to build a fulfilling life despite the pain." Slowly, I began assembling a chosen family. Lucia introduced me to her study group, who welcomed me without question. I joined the campus newspaper, finding kinship among fellow writers. By junior year, I had a solid circle of friends who knew my full story and loved me anyway. My senior year brought an unexpected opportunity, an internship at a prestigious marketing firm in the city. The experience confirmed that I'd found my calling, and upon graduation they offered me a full-time position. At 22, I had a degree, a professional job, and my first apartment, a tiny studio that represented more independence than I'd ever imagined possible at 16. The next few years were focused on career growth and continuing to build my new life. I rose steadily through the ranks at the marketing agency, earning a reputation for creativity and dedication. My small circle of close friends became the support system I relied on for celebrations and comfort alike. It was at a work conference in New York when I was 24 that I met Daniel. He was presenting a session on digital strategy for nonprofit organizations, his passion for the subject evident in every word. During the networking reception afterward, we ended up in the same conversation group, and I was struck by his thoughtful questions and genuine interest in others' perspectives. "Marketing shouldn't just be about selling products," he said when I asked about his approach. "It should be about connecting people with solutions that actually improve their lives." We exchanged business cards, and what started as professional follow-up emails quickly evolved into personal messages, then phone calls, then weekend visits between Boston and New York. 6 months later, when he was offered a position at a Boston firm, our relationship shifted from long distance to seeing each other several times a week. Daniel's family was everything mine hadn't been: stable, supportive, and unfailingly kind. The first time he took me home to Connecticut to meet them, I was terrified. What if they thought I was damaged goods? What if they sensed the abandonment issues I was still working through? Instead, his parents welcomed me with genuine warmth. His mother, Margaret, hugged me like I was already family. His father, Robert, who couldn't have been more different from my uncle Robert, asked thoughtful questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. His younger sister, Taylor, immediately declared that we would be friends and proceeded to make it happen through sheer force of will. "Your family is amazing," I told Daniel on the drive back to Boston. "They're so normal." He laughed. "They have their quirks, believe me. But yeah, they're pretty great." "Do they know?" I asked hesitantly. "About my family situation?" "I told them the basics," he admitted. "I hope that's okay. I thought it would be easier for you not having to decide whether to explain." Instead of feeling exposed, I felt relieved. There would be no awkward questions about why my parents hadn't joined us for holidays, no need to construct elaborate fictions about a family that had erased me. As our relationship deepened, I found myself sharing more and more of my past with Daniel. Late one night, curled together on his couch, I confessed the question that still haunted me. What if there's something fundamentally unlovable about me? I whispered. My own father could stop loving me overnight. What if everyone else realizes whatever he saw and leaves too? Daniel turned to face me fully, his expression serious. Your father didn't stop loving you because of anything you did or any flaw in who you are. He stopped because of his own inability to separate his feelings about your mother's choices from his relationship with you. That's his failure, not yours. With Daniel's support and continued therapy, I finally felt ready to face another unresolved aspect of my past, my biological father, Thomas, the man whose existence had shattered my family, but who remained a complete mystery to me. Using the investigative skills I'd developed in marketing research, I tracked him down to a university in Wisconsin where he taught chemistry. The email I sent him was brief and direct. My name is Maxine Barrett. I have reason to believe you may be my biological father. My mother is Diana Barrett, formerly Diana Collins. I was born on September 12, 1998. If you're willing, I'd like to talk with you. His response came within hours, expressing shock, confusion, and a willingness to meet. 2 weeks later, I sat across from him in a quiet cafe halfway between Boston and Wisconsin. The resemblance between us was undeniable. We had the same blue eyes, the same way of tilting our heads when thinking, even similar gestures when speaking. I had no idea, he said repeatedly, his voice a mix of wonder and regret. Diana never told me she was pregnant. We broke up so suddenly. I tried to contact her, but she wouldn't take my calls. Eventually, I moved on with my life, but I always wondered what really happened. Thomas had married eventually and had 2 children, but he and his wife had divorced 5 years earlier. He showed me photos of my half-siblings, a strange new branch of family I'd never known existed. I missed your whole childhood, he said sadly. I can never get that back. But I'd like to know you now if you're open to that. We agreed to proceed cautiously with occasional calls and emails as we figured out what kind of relationship was possible after so many years. It wasn't the instant father-daughter bond of movies, but it was something real, a connection neither of us had known we were missing. Life continued to evolve in positive ways. Daniel and I moved in together, combining our book collections and arguing good-naturedly about decor. My career advanced with a promotion to senior strategist, and then on a weekend trip to the Maine coast, Daniel proposed at sunset, presenting a ring and a future I hadn't dared to imagine. I know family is complicated for you, he said after I'd said yes through happy tears. But I want you to know that by marrying me, you're gaining a whole clan of people who already love you and will always be there for you. As we began planning our wedding, I felt truly happy and secure for the first time in a decade. The painful past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined me or limited what I believed was possible for my life. The abandoned 16-year-old girl had grown into a woman who had created her own definition of family and success. That hard-won peace was about to be tested in ways I never expected. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, sandwiched between a work newsletter and a reminder about my dentist appointment. The sender's name stopped my breath. Sophia Barrett, my sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. The subject line was even more startling: please read important family news. My hand trembled as I clicked to open it, unsure whether to expect good news or bad, unsure which would be more unsettling after so many years of silence. The message was brief but packed with implications. Maxine, I know it's been a long time and I'm sorry for that. Dad has been diagnosed with a heart condition. It's made him think a lot about the past and things he regrets. The whole family would like to reconnect with you. Could we talk? My number is still the same if you remember it. Love, Sophia. Love. As if the last 10 years of estrangement could be bridged with a single word. I stared at the screen, a storm of emotions churning inside me. Concern for my father's health warred with bitter memories of his rejection. Curiosity about reconnection battled with hard-earned protective instincts. I showed the email to Daniel that evening, watching his face as he read it. What are you thinking? He asked, setting his phone down and taking my hand. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to know more. Another part is screaming to delete it and pretend I never saw it. You don't have to decide right now, he reminded me. Take some time to process. 3 days later, after much reflection and an emergency therapy session, I texted Sophia. A neutral response: I received your email. I'd like to hear more about Dad's condition. Not committing to anything beyond information gathering. Her reply came almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting by her phone. He has atrial fibrillation and needs surgery. The doctors say his prognosis is good with treatment, but it's been a wake-up call for all of us. Can I call you? Our first conversation was awkward, full of long pauses and careful words. Sophia was now 24, working as a graphic designer in Chicago, still living near our parents. She filled me in on the family I'd been erased from. Andrew was married with a baby on the way. Mom had retired from teaching. Dad had stepped back from his business, handing more responsibility to Andrew. He asks about you, Sophia said tentatively. Dad, I mean. More in the last few months since his diagnosis. He could have asked any time in the last 10 years. I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I know, she said quietly. None of us handled things well. But he's different now, Maxine. Facing mortality changes people. The next day, my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Her voice, older and thinner than I remembered, broke into sobs almost immediately. Maxine, my baby, I'm so sorry. I've been the worst mother. I should have stood up for you. I should have chosen you. Can you ever forgive me? Her apology was emotional, but oddly centered on her own guilt and pain, rather than what I had experienced. Still, it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received. I've built a life without you, Mom, I said finally. I'm getting married next year. I have a career, friends, a home. Where were you when I needed you most? I was weak, she admitted. I was afraid of losing James and the life we had. But not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted letting you go. Please give us a chance to make things right. Over the next few weeks, the contact increased. Andrew sent a friend request on social media with a message about wanting his child to know their aunt. Family photos appeared in my inbox updates from the years I'd missed. And then came the formal letter from my father, his familiar handwriting a shock to my system. Dear Maxine, he wrote, words cannot express the depth of my regret for how I treated you. My heart condition has forced me to face the possibility of leaving this world with unresolved wrongs. The greatest of these is what I did to you. You were my daughter in every way that matters, and I threw that away out of pride and hurt. I would be deeply honored if you would allow me to walk you down the aisle at your wedding, though I understand if you refuse. Either way, I hope we might begin to rebuild what I so foolishly destroyed. With love and deepest apologies, Dad. The letter left me breathless and confused. The apology I had longed for years ago was finally in my hands, but instead of bringing closure, it reopened wounds I thought had scarred over. I shared it with Dr. Chen at our next session. What do you want to do? She asked after I'd read it aloud. I don't know, I confessed. Part of me has dreamed of this moment reconciliation, acknowledgement of the wrong done to me. But now that it's happening, it feels, I don't know, too easy. Like they think a few apologies can erase 10 years of acting like I don't exist. It's okay to be skeptical, she assured me. Reconciliation, if you choose it, should happen on your terms and timeline. The pressure increased as weeks passed. My family began reaching out to mutual acquaintances and distant relatives, enlisting them as advocates. Your father's health, they would say. Family is everything. Life is too short to hold grudges. As if I were the one who had rejected them, not the other way around. My inbox filled with wedding suggestions from my mother, who seemed to assume she would be involved in the planning. Sophia sent links to father-daughter dance songs. Andrew called to say that Dad was researching father of the bride speeches. Then came the unannounced visit. I opened my apartment door one Saturday morning to find my parents standing in the hallway, my mother clutching a gift bag, my father looking older and frailer than I remembered, but still tall and imposing. Surprise, my mother said weakly, as I stood frozen in shock. We were in the area, my father added, though Boston was nowhere near their usual travel destinations. I let them in because I couldn't think of a reasonable excuse not to, and because part of me was still that 16-year-old desperate for her parents' love. They sat uncomfortably on my couch, eyes roving over the evidence of the life I'd built without them. "You have a lovely home," my mother said, though her expression suggested she found my decor choices questionable. "Thank you," I replied stiffly. "I wasn't expecting visitors." "We should have called," my father acknowledged. "But we were afraid you might say no." "That would have been my right," I pointed out. "Of course," he agreed quickly. "Maxine, I know we can't undo the past, but your mother and I want to be part of your future, your wedding, eventual grandchildren. We've missed so much already." As they continued talking, laying out their vision of renewed family ties, as if my cooperation were a foregone conclusion, I felt a growing unease. There was something performative about their contrition, something that centered their needs rather than mine. The final red flag came when I mentioned that Daniel's parents had already offered to contribute significantly to the wedding costs. "Well, traditionally, the bride's family pays," my mother interjected. "We'd be happy to take over that responsibility. Linda and Robert don't need to worry about it." "Actually, we've already accepted their offer," I said. "They've been incredibly supportive of us." My father's expression tightened. "Supportive in a way we weren't allowed to be," he said. "If you'd given us the chance?" "Allowed to be," I repeated, disbelief coloring my voice. "You threw me out when I was 16. You cut me off completely. I didn't allow anything. You made your choice very clear." "That was a different time," he said dismissively. "I was hurt and angry. Surely you can understand that now that you're older." Before I could respond, my mother jumped in. "What your father is trying to say is that we all made mistakes. If you were truly over it, Maxine, you'd be willing to forgive and move forward as a family." That statement, the implication that my hesitation was a sign of emotional immaturity rather than reasonable caution, finally clarified what had been bothering me about their sudden reappearance. They weren't seeking reconciliation. They were seeking absolution without accountability, a return to family harmony that required me to pretend the abandonment had never happened. As they left, promising to call soon about wedding plans they had no right to make, I felt oddly lighter. The decision that had been weighing on me suddenly seemed clear. This wasn't about healing, it was about appearance. My father, facing his mortality, wanted to tie up loose ends. My mother wanted to be able to show pictures of her daughter's wedding to her friends. Neither seemed particularly interested in who I had become during the years of their absence. Later, I learned from Sophia that much of the reconciliation push was coming from Deborah, my father's new wife of 5 years, a woman I had never met. "She's big on family image," Sophia explained reluctantly. "She thinks it looks bad that Dad has an estranged daughter, especially now that they're more involved with her church." The pieces fell into place. My family wasn't reaching out because they valued me. They were reaching out because my absence had become inconvenient to the family narrative they wanted to present to the world. The revelation about my family's true motivations sent me spiraling into a confusion of emotions. For a brief moment, I had allowed myself to hope that perhaps there could be healing, that the wounds of the past might finally close. Now I was faced with a choice: accept a superficial reconciliation that would paper over the deep hurt, but never truly address it, or stand firm in the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. That evening, Daniel found me on our balcony staring out at the city lights. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat beside me, patient as always. I wanted to believe they had changed, I admitted, that my father had realized what he threw away and genuinely wanted to make amends. But this isn't about me at all. It's about his image, his comfort, his desire to feel better about himself before— I couldn't finish the sentence. "Before he might die," Daniel completed gently. "It's okay to acknowledge that." Is it wrong that part of me still wants to say yes, to pretend everything is fine just to have a family again? "It's not wrong," he assured me. "It's human. We all want to belong, to be connected to our roots. But Maxie, you've built something beautiful without them. You have people who love you for exactly who you are, not for how you fit into their narrative." The next day, I called an emergency meeting of what I had come to think of as my council of support, Daniel, Lucia, who had remained my closest friend since college, Zoe, who had been there from the beginning, and Thomas, my biological father, with whom I had developed a cautious but genuine relationship over the past 2 years. We gathered in my apartment sharing pizza and perspectives as I laid out the situation and my confusion about how to proceed. "You don't owe them a place in your wedding," Lucia said bluntly, "especially if their motives are about appearances rather than genuine care for you." Zoe, who had witnessed the original trauma firsthand, was even more emphatic. "They abandoned you when you needed them most. My mom still gets angry talking about how they treated you. They don't get to waltz back in when it's convenient and claim father of the bride privileges." Thomas was more measured perhaps because of his complicated position in the whole scenario. "I can't tell you what to do, Maxine, but I would say that forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. You can forgive them without allowing them to hurt you again." Daniel, knowing me best, simply asked, "What does your heart tell you? Not the part that's still hoping for the family you deserve to have, but the part that knows who you really are now." Their perspectives helped clarify my own feelings, but the final decision came later that week during a session with Dr. Chen. We had been discussing the concept of forgiveness when she posed a question that shifted everything for me. "What would true reconciliation look like to you, Maxine? Not what your family is offering, but what would you need to feel whole in relation to them?" I considered this carefully. "Acknowledgement," I said finally. "Real acknowledgement of the depth of what they did, not just mistakes were made or we were all going through a hard time. I need them to understand that they broke something fundamental when they rejected me and that it changed me forever. And if they can't or won't provide that level of acknowledgement, then I think I need to protect the life and the chosen family I've built. They're offering conditional love based on my willingness to pretend the past didn't happen, but I deserve more than that. I deserve people who love me without conditions." With that clarity, I scheduled a meeting with my father alone. We met at a neutral location, a cafe near my office. He looked nervous, fingering his coffee cup and glancing around as if searching for script prompts. "Thank you for meeting me," I began, determined to control the conversation from the outset. "I've given a lot of thought to your request to be part of my wedding and my life going forward." He leaned forward eagerly. "And I can't do it," I said simply. "At least not in the way you're asking." His face fell, a flash of the old anger briefly crossing his features before he composed himself. "I see. May I ask why?" I took a deep breath, centering myself in the strength I had built over a decade of healing. "Because you haven't really seen me, Dad. Not then and not now. You saw me as an extension of yourself until you learned I wasn't biologically yours. Then you saw me as evidence of Mom's betrayal. Now you see me as a loose end to tie up well before your health potentially worsens. But you've never seen me for who I actually am." "That's not fair," he protested. "I raised you for 16 years. "And then you erased me for 10, I countered. "You removed my pictures, converted my room, forbade anyone from mentioning my name. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? To be treated as if you never existed by the people who are supposed to love you most." For the first time, I saw something like real understanding in his eyes. "I was hurt," he said quietly. "I lashed out. At a child," I reminded him. "At your child. Because that's what I was, biology aside. You were the only father I knew and you threw me away." We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke again. "What would you have me do? Maxine. How do I make this right?" "I don't think you can," I said honestly. "Some things can't be undone, but I'm willing to build something new, something small and honest. I'll meet with you occasionally. We can talk, get to know who we've become. But my wedding, that's for the people who stood by me when you wouldn't." He didn't like my answer, that was clear from his expression, but he nodded slowly. "And your mother, your siblings. The same applies to them. Small steps. No pretending the past didn't happen. No instant happy family reunions." I left that meeting feeling lighter than I had in months, secure in my decision and in the boundaries I had established. When I told Daniel about the conversation, he hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," he said. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I agreed, but it was necessary. In the months that followed, I wrote a long, honest letter to my father explaining in detail how his rejection had affected me and what I needed from him if we were to establish any kind of relationship going forward. I sent similar letters to my mother and siblings tailored to their specific roles in what had happened. The responses varied. My father's was brief but thoughtful, an acknowledgement that he had indeed put his own pain above my well-being. My mother's was tearful and somewhat self-pitying, but showed glimmers of understanding. Andrew didn't respond at all. Sophia sent a text. I get it. Take all the time you need. Wedding planning continued now, free from the cloud of family obligation that had been hanging over it. In a decision that felt both symbolic and deeply right, I asked both Thomas and Mr. Parker, Zoe's father, who had taken me in when my own father cast me out, to share the honor of walking me down the aisle. They both accepted with genuine emotion. My mother, after some initial hurt, accepted that she would be attending as a guest, not as the mother of the bride in any traditional sense. Margaret Daniel's mother continued in her role as my primary maternal support, helping with dress shopping and hosting the bridal shower. The wedding day itself dawned clear and bright, a perfect June Saturday, reminiscent of that long-ago birthday when everything had changed. But this time, I was surrounded by people whose love for me was unconditional and proven. As I prepared to walk down the aisle, Thomas on one side and Mr. Parker on the other, I caught sight of my father and mother seated quietly in the middle rows, separate from each other, respectful of the boundaries I had established. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or erasing the past. It meant acknowledging what happened, understanding its impact, and choosing to move forward, unburdened by bitterness. I had created my own definition of family, a tapestry of chosen connections and biological ties bound together by respect and genuine care rather than obligation. The ceremony was everything Daniel and I had hoped for, a celebration of the love and life we had built together. During the reception, my father approached me briefly. "You look beautiful, Maxine," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "Thank you for allowing me to be here." "Thank you for coming," I replied, meaning it. "I hope, perhaps we could have lunch sometime next month, just to talk." "I'd like that," I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. As I rejoined Daniel on the dance floor, I felt a profound sense of peace. The abandoned 16-year-old girl had grown into a woman strong enough to protect herself while remaining open to genuine connection. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or by legal documents, but by who shows up when it matters most. Sometimes that includes biological relatives. Sometimes it doesn't. The choice of who to include in your life is yours to make. The past cannot be undone, but it need not dictate the future. In choosing to define family and forgiveness on my own terms, I had finally found the freedom to write my own story, one in which I was neither victim nor villain, but simply human navigating life with as much grace and honesty as possible. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who hurt you? How did you balance forgiveness with self-protection? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve unconditional love and respect. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we create is more healing than the one we're born into.